The artificial gravity on the USS Horizon faltered for a moment as the ship settled into orbit around exoplanet LV-227. Lieutenant Greg Mason steadied himself against the lab counter and watched through the viewport as the world below came into focus. Blue-green oceans wrapped around landmasses that resembled no continent on Earth. This was his 9th exoplanet expedition, but the thrill never faded. Beautiful, isn't it? Greg said to no one in particular. Dr. Lisa Carter looked up from her microscope. Just remember that beauty has teeth out here, she said. Command's reports show this planet is home to at least 17 predator species we know of. Greg smiled. That's why I joined Exploration Corps instead of staying in the lab back home. I want to see the teeth up close. Lisa shook her head. Your enthusiasm will get you killed someday. The ship's comm system crackled. Expedition team to Bay 3. Launch in 15 minutes. Greg gathered his sample kit and headed to the launch bay. Security Chief Allison Wright was already there, checking weapons with her team. Her expression hardened when she saw Greg. Mason, my team isn't here to protect you while you pet the local wildlife. We go down, we get samples, we come back. No detours. Greg raised his hands in surrender. Noted, Chief, but if we happen to find something interesting, we observe from a safe distance and record it. Period. Allison turned to address the whole team. Intel suggests Vorn activity in this sector. If you see anything with 6 limbs and reflective scales, you call it in immediately. The expedition shuttle broke atmosphere 20 minutes later. The pilot, Joe Kelly, brought them down in a clearing near a forest edge. The science team deployed, with security forming a perimeter. Greg breathed deeply as the ramp lowered. Every new world had its own smell. LV-227's was earthy with hints of something like cinnamon. He stepped onto alien soil, instruments all ready, recording everything from air composition to trace microbials. 4 hours, Allison reminded everyone. Then we're back on the shuttle no matter what. The team spread out within the designated safe zone. Greg found himself drawn to an area where the vegetation changed color from deep purple to a lighter lavender. His scanner detected higher concentrations of an unknown compound. Following the readings, he moved farther from the group, careful. To stay within comm range, the scanner led him to a small ravine. Greg peered over the edge and froze. Below, lying motionless on a bed of purple vegetation, was a creature unlike anything he'd seen before. 6 limbs with articulated joints. Body covered in iridescent scales that shifted color with each shallow breath. A head with no visible eyes, but sensor pits that ran along what appeared to be a skull ridge. AVORN. Protocol demanded he call it in immediately. The Vorn were known killers, intelligent predators that had attacked human outposts unprovoked. Every encounter had ended in bloodshed, but this one wasn't moving. A dark fluid leaked from a wound in what Greg guessed was its side. The creature was injured, possibly dying. Greg keyed his comm. Mason to Wright. Go ahead, came Allison's terse reply. I've got something you need to see. Coordinates uploading now. Is it hostile? Greg looked at the wounded alien. Not at the moment. Allison and 2 security officers arrived in minutes. She swore when she saw the Vorn. Back away, Mason. That thing could wake up and tear you apart, even in that condition. It's dying, Greg said. Look at the blood loss. And that wound wasn't caused by a fall. Something attacked it. Not our problem. I'm calling this in. Greg stepped between Allison and the creature. We can't just leave it. The hell we can't. Vorn have killed 300 colonists in the past year alone. And how many Vorn have we killed? Have we ever tried to communicate? To understand them? Allison's face hardened. That's not our mission. Our mission is to explore and learn, Greg countered. This is a unique opportunity. A wounded Vorn that can't attack us. We could learn why they're so aggressive, maybe even find a way to establish contact. Absolutely not. We are not bringing that thing aboard. Greg stood his ground. The science directive gives me authority over xenobiological specimens. Section 12, paragraph 4. That's a dangerous predator, not a specimen. It's both. Greg turned to the security officers. We need a containment stretcher and medical support. Now. Allison grabbed his arm. Captain Banks will never approve this. Then let him tell me that himself. 90 minutes later, against the protests of security, engineering, and half the science department, the wounded Vorn lay in a level 10 containment cell in the ship's science bay. Force fields and transparent aluminum separated it from the outside world. Captain Banks loomed over Greg. If that thing breaks loose and kills anyone on my ship, Lieutenant, I'll personally see you court-martialed. It won't break loose, Greg assured him. And Dr. Carter says it's too weak to be a threat right now. Lisa was inside the containment area, running a medical scanner over the Vorn's body. Her voice came through the speakers. Fascinating anatomy. The cellular structure is unlike anything in our database. Can you save it? Greg asked. Lisa looked up, her expression troubled. I think so. But the question is, should I? Every life. Form deserves a chance, Greg said quietly. Captain Banks snorted. Tell that to the families of the dead colonists. An urgent beep from the communication station interrupted them. Lieutenant Dan Wells called out, Captain, priority message from Command. They're responding to our Vorn report. Banks moved to the station and read the message. His face darkened. Command orders us to terminate the specimen immediately and preserve it for autopsy at Central Research. Greg felt his stomach drop. Sir, with all due respect, we have an opportunity here that these orders come directly from Admiral Howard. Banks cut him off. The decision is final. At that moment, Lisa's voice rose in alarm. It's waking up. All eyes turned to the containment cell. The Vorn's body had begun to move, its limbs twitching. The sensor pits along its head ridge flared open, revealing glimpses of something like eyes beneath. Security officers raised their weapons. Allison stepped forward. Dr. Carter, get out of there now. Lisa backed toward the cell exit, scanner still. In her hand, its neural activity is spiking. It's becoming aware. The Vorn rose to what appeared to be a crouching position, its 6 limbs arranged to support its body. The head swiveled, sensor pits scanning the room. When it spotted Lisa, a low vibration filled the air, a sound that seemed to bypass the ears and resonate directly in the bones. Lisa, don't move, Greg said quietly. Just back away slowly. The creature's attention shifted. Its head turned until the sensor pits were aimed directly at Greg. A vibration changed pitch, becoming almost musical. Everyone expected an attack. The Vorn were known for their speed and ferocity, but the creature simply stared at Greg. Then, to everyone's shock, it lowered its front limbs in what looked almost like a bow. What the hell? Allison whispered. Greg stepped closer to the containment field. The Vorn tracked his movement, but made no aggressive gesture. It's not attacking, Greg said, wonder in his voice. It's acknowledging me, Captain Banks frowned. This doesn't change our orders. Greg turned to him, a new determination in his eyes. Sir, please. Something unprecedented is happening here. The Vorn isn't behaving like any we've encountered. Give me 24 hours to study it before we carry out Command's orders. Banks looked at the Vorn, then at the hope in Greg's eyes. After a long moment, he nodded. 24 hours, Lieutenant. Not a minute more. As the others filed out, Greg remained, watching the alien predator that was watching him with equal intensity. Something told him that in this moment, everything they thought they knew about the Vorn was about to change. The predator now answered to the human. But why? 1 week had passed since Greg found the injured Vorn. Captain Banks had reluctantly extended the 24-hour study period after witnessing the creature's unusual behavior. The Vorn, which Greg privately called Hunter, had healed quickly under Dr. Carter's care. Its wounds closed within days, revealing remarkable regenerative abilities. Greg sat cross-legged on the floor outside the containment field, watching Hunter mimic his posture. The alien predator had 6 limbs, but arranged them in ways that echoed Greg's human form. This mirroring behavior fascinated everyone on the science team. "It's learning from you," Lisa said as she entered the lab. "The neural scans show increased activity in what we think are its learning centers whenever you're present." Greg nodded. "Watch this." He raised his right hand slowly. Inside the containment field, Hunter raised what appeared to be its right front limb. Lisa's eyes widened. "Remarkable. But is it just copying, or does it understand?" "I think it understands more than we realize," Greg said. "Samantha thinks she can help us find out." Engineer Samantha Peters arrived carrying what looked like a modified helmet. "My neural interface prototype," she explained. "It's designed to translate brainwave patterns into basic concepts. It might help us bridge the communication gap." Lisa looked skeptical. "You want to connect your mind to that thing? We have no idea how its brain works." "The interface doesn't connect directly," Samantha assured her. "It reads patterns and attempts to find equivalent human concepts. Completely safe." Greg stood up. "I volunteered to try it." Lisa started to protest, but Captain Banks entered with Allison Wright. The security chief still looked unhappy about the whole situation. "Lieutenant Mason," Banks said formally, "I've received new orders from command. They're sending a specialist to take over this research. Dr. Frank Harris will arrive in 3 days to transfer the specimen to a dedicated facility." Greg felt a surge of protectiveness. "Sir, we're making real progress here. The Vorn is responding to us. Moving it now could disrupt everything we've learned." "These orders come from higher up than Admiral Howard," Banks replied. "Apparently. Your reports have attracted serious attention." Allison stepped forward. "The transfer team is bringing a specialized containment unit and armed escorts. They're not taking chances." Greg looked back at Hunter, who seemed to sense his distress. The Vorn had moved closer to the field barrier, its sensor pits flaring. "Just give us these 3 days," Greg pleaded. "Let us try Samantha's interface before Dr. Harris arrives." Banks considered this. "You have until Harris arrives. But at the first sign of danger, I'm ordering the specimen sedated until transfer." After they left, Greg turned to Samantha. "How soon can we try the interface?" "It's ready now," she said. "But I should warn you, this is experimental technology. The results might be unpredictable." Greg didn't hesitate. "Let's do it." An hour later, Greg sat in a chair near the containment field with Samantha's neural interface fitted to his head. Lisa monitored his vital signs while Samantha calibrated the system. "The interface will create a feedback loop," Samantha explained. "It reads your brainwaves, converts them to signals the Vorn might understand, and then reads its responses and converts them back." Greg took a deep breath. "I'm ready." Samantha activated the interface. At first, Greg felt nothing. Then a wave of sensations washed over him, colors he couldn't name, scents that had no Earth equivalent, and emotions so alien they defied description. "Greg?" Lisa's voice seemed far away. "Your heart rate is elevated. Should we stop?" Greg shook his head slightly. "No. I'm getting something." The jumble of sensations gradually resolved into something more coherent. Not words exactly, but concepts. Hunter was communicating. Predator, prey, hunt, pain, help, human, different. Greg focused his thoughts, trying to project simple ideas back. Friend, No harm. Help you. Why no attack? The response came as a flood of impressions. Greg saw himself. Through Hunter's senses, a heat signature, a scent profile, and something else. Something unique. It's your pheromones, Greg gasped as understanding dawned. Hunter isn't attacking because of how I smell to him. Lisa looked confused. What do you mean? The Vorn communicate partly through chemical signals, Greg explained. The interface still feeding him insights. Something in my specific biochemistry is triggering a non-aggressive response. Samantha adjusted some controls. The interface is stabilizing. Try asking why it attacked other humans. Greg concentrated. Why attack other humans? Why kill? Images flashed through Greg's mind, humans firing weapons, Vorn falling, blood, and pain. Then older memories, human outposts expanding into territories, marked with Vorn chemical signals, warnings ignored, boundaries crossed. They tried to warn us, Greg said softly. The attacks weren't unprovoked. We've been expanding into their hunting grounds, missing all their territorial markers because we didn't know how to read them. He felt Hunter's attention focus intently on him. The neural connection deepened, and suddenly Greg understood something profound. The Vorn weren't mindless killers. They were hunters with a complex society and code. And somehow, Greg's unique biochemistry had marked him as something new in their understanding. Not prey, not enemy, but something the Vorn had no concept. For the next day, Greg spent hours with Hunter, the neural interface, helping them build a rudimentary language of shared concepts. Lisa ran tests on Greg's blood and tissue samples, trying to isolate what made him special to the Vorn. I've found something, she announced late that evening. Your pheromone profile includes a compound that's chemically similar to a Vorn submission signal, but it's combined with something they've never encountered before. What does that mean? Greg asked. It means that to Hunter, you smell like a Vorn leader, but also something completely alien. The combination is confusing their instincts. Instead of triggering aggression, it's triggering curiosity. Greg looked at Hunter, who had been watching their exchange. So it's just biology? Not actual communication or understanding? Lisa shook her head. The biology opened the door, but what's happening now is more. The neural scans show Hunter's brain forming new pathways. It's literally rewiring itself to understand you. Through the interface, Greg sensed Hunter's agreement. The concept came through clearly. Learn, new, change. On the third day, just hours before Dr. Harris was due to arrive, Greg made a breakthrough. With the interface helping, Hunter conveyed a complex message about its people. The Vorn weren't just territorial, they were desperate. Something was driving them from their traditional hunting grounds, forcing them into conflict with humans. They're running from something, Greg told Lisa and Samantha. Something even they fear. The ships. Intercom interrupted them. Lieutenant Mason to docking bay. The transfer team has arrived. Greg removed the neural interface reluctantly. I need more time with him. Dr. Harris won't care, Lisa said grimly. I've heard stories about his research methods. Greg looked at Hunter, who pressed a limb against the containment field. Through their hours of connection, a bond had formed that went beyond words or even concepts. Greg placed his hand against the field, mirroring Hunter's gesture. I'll find a way to help you, he promised. Somehow. As Greg left to meet the transfer team, he didn't see Hunter's sensor pits flare with new understanding. The Predator watched him go, its alien mind forming a concept no Vorn had ever had before. Trust in a human. Dr. Frank Harris was not what Greg expected. The man who stepped off the transport shuttle was small, with thin gray hair and round glasses that gave him an owlish look. But his eyes were cold and calculating as they swept over the welcoming party. Lieutenant Mason, Harris said, extending a bony hand. I've read your reports with great interest. Most interesting indeed. Greg shook the offered hand briefly. Thank you, sir. I'm eager to share our findings about the Vorn's communication patterns. Harris smiled thinly. Yes, all in good time. First, I'd like to see the specimen. Captain Banks led them to the science bay where Hunter was being held. The Vorn became alert as they entered, its sensor pits focusing immediately on Greg. Through their sessions with the neural interface, Greg had learned to read Hunter's body language. The Predator was tense, wary of the newcomers. Harris approached the containment field, studying Hunter with undisguised fascination. Magnificent, he murmured. And you say it responds to you specifically, Lieutenant? Yes, sir. We believe it's due to a unique chemical marker in my pheromone profile. Harris nodded absently, his attention fixed on Hunter. Show me. Greg stepped closer to the field. Hunter immediately moved toward him, mirroring his posture. Greg raised a hand in their now familiar greeting, and Hunter raised a corresponding limb. Remarkable, Harris said, like a trained animal. Greg winced at the comparison. With respect, sir, the Vorn are highly intelligent. Our neural interface sessions suggest they have a complex society and language. Harris turned to him with sudden interest. Neural interface? That wasn't in your reports. It's experimental technology, Samantha explained, stepping forward. We've only just begun testing it. I want to see it in action, Harris demanded. 30 minutes later, Greg sat with the neural interface helmet, while Harris, Banks, and Allison watched. Samantha monitored the equipment as Greg established connection with Hunter. The familiar flood of alien sensations washed over him. Hunter's consciousness pressed against his mind, urgent and insistent. Danger. New human. Threat. Pain coming. Greg tried to project reassurance. No danger. New human help study. Learn together. Hunter's response was unmistakable. False. Deception. Pain tools. Death study. Greg's eyes snapped open. He's afraid, he said aloud. He says Dr. Harris means him harm. Harris laughed dismissively. Projecting human emotions onto an alien predator, Lieutenant? Hardly scientific. I'm telling you what I'm receiving through the interface, Greg insisted. Hunter the Vorn believes your intentions are hostile. Hunter? Harris raised an eyebrow. You've named it? It helps to have a designation for study purposes, Greg said, uncomfortable under Harris's scrutiny. Harris turned to Captain Banks. I think we've seen enough. Prepare the specimen for transfer. My team will handle it from here. Sir, Greg began, we've barely scratched the surface of what we can learn. If you just give us more time. Your time with the specimen is over. Lieutenant, Harris cut him off coldly. You've done good work finding it, but proper study requires proper facilities. After Harris left with Banks, Greg removed the interface helmet. Hunter pressed against the containment field, its sensor pits flaring with agitation. Did you pick up anything else? Samantha asked quietly. Greg nodded grimly. Hunter accessed some of my memories of military research projects. He recognized similarities between Harris's manner and scientists who conducted painful experiments on other species. Lisa joined them, looking troubled. I did some digging on Dr. Harris. His research facility has a classified section with no oversight. Rumors say they're developing biological weapons. Greg felt sick. They're going to dissect him. We don't know that, Samantha said, but her voice lacked conviction. Greg stared at Hunter, who was still watching him intently. I can't let that happen. That night, alone in his quarters, Greg was awakened by Captain Banks. The captain's face was grim. Lieutenant, you're confined to quarters until further notice. Dr. Harris has accused you of attempting to sabotage his research. Greg sat up. What? That's ridiculous. He claims you've compromised the specimen's behavior with your interface experiments. He's ordered the Vorn to be sedated for the remainder of the journey to his facility. Sir, you can't let him do this, Greg pleaded. The Vorn aren't just animals. They're intelligent. What Harris plans is essentially torture. Banks sighed. I don't like this either, Mason, but orders are orders. A security team will be posted outside your door. Stay put. After Banks left, Greg paced his small quarters. Through his sessions with Hunter, he had developed a kind of empathic link that persisted even without the interface. He could sense Hunter's growing fear and rage as the sedatives began to take effect. His comm unit beeped softly. It was Samantha. Greg, Lisa and I have been talking. We don't think what's happening is right. Neither do I. But what can we do? I'm locked in my quarters. Not for long. Allison is coming to get you. Greg was shocked. Chief Wright? She's been against this from the start. Turns out she has principles, too. She looked into Harris's background and doesn't like what she found. 20 minutes later, his door slid open. Allison stood there, her expression stern. Let's be clear. Mason, I still think bringing that thing aboard was a mistake. But experimenting on sentient beings is against everything I stand for. Greg followed her through back corridors of the ship, avoiding the main paths where they might be seen. Harris sedated the Vorn, Allison explained as they hurried. But Lisa thinks it's fighting the drugs. Something about its unique biology. They reached the science bay to find Samantha and Lisa waiting. Hunter was inside the containment field, movement sluggish, but still conscious. How do we get him out? Greg asked. Lisa handed him an injector. This will counteract the sedative. But Greg, even if we free him, where will you go? Harris has a team of 6 security officers. We take a shuttle, Greg said. There's a Vorn hunting ground on the second moon of this planet. Hunter showed me in our neural link. If we can reach his people, maybe we can establish real communication. Allison looked doubtful. That's a huge risk. So is staying here, Greg countered. Harris won't stop with Hunter. If he learns what we know about the Vorn, he'll want to capture more of them. Samantha finished overriding the containment field controls. Field coming down in 3, 2. Double quotes, the barrier vanished. Hunter rose to its full height, swaying slightly from the sedative's effects. Everyone tensed, but the Vorn's attention was solely on Greg. Greg stepped forward slowly, injector ready. I hope this works, he muttered. Hunter extended a limb, almost like offering an arm for the injection. Greg carefully administered the counter-sedative. Within seconds, the Vorn's movements became more coordinated. Alarms suddenly blared throughout. The ship, a voice over the intercom announced, Security breach in Science Bay 3. All personnel respond. Greg looked at his friends. Last chance to back out. Lisa handed him a packed bag. Medical supplies and rations. The neural interface is in there too. Allison drew her weapon. I'll hold them off as long as I can. Shuttle. Bay 2 is the closest. Greg turned to Hunter. We need to run. Now. To everyone's surprise, Hunter moved to Greg's side like a trained partner. Together, they headed for the door just as the sound of running footsteps echoed down the corridor. Hunt was on. But this time, the Predator and the human were on the same side. The shuttle shuddered as it entered the atmosphere of the small moon. Greg struggled with the controls, sweat beading on his forehead. He was a scientist, not a pilot, and the pursuit ships from the USS Horizon had damaged one of the engines before he and Hunter managed to jump to lightspeed. Hang on, he muttered to Hunter, who crouched in the rear compartment. The Vorn seemed to understand the danger. Its 6 limbs were anchored firmly to the floor, claws extended for better grip. The neural interface lay between them, but there had been no time to use it during their frantic escape. Warning lights flashed across the control panel. Greg couldn't land safely with a damaged engine. Their descent was too steep, too fast. Brace for impact. He shouted, pulling back on the controls with all his strength. The shuttle hit the ground hard, skidding across rocky terrain before coming to rest against a massive boulder. The impact threw Greg against his restraints, knocking the wind from his lungs. Warning alarms blared as smoke filled the cabin. Greg coughed and unfastened his harness with shaking hands. "Hunter, are you okay?" A shape moved through the smoke. Hunter appeared beside him, seemingly unharmed. The Vorn's tough exoskeleton had protected it from the crash. One of its limbs extended toward Greg, helping him to his feet. "Thanks," Greg said, wincing at a pain in his side. "Probably a broken rib. We need to get out before this thing blows." He grabbed the emergency pack and the neural interface. Hunter moved to the shuttle's rear hatch and with surprising strength forced it open. They stumbled out onto the moon's surface just as flames erupted from the shuttle's engine compartment. Greg took a moment to catch his breath and survey their surroundings. The moon's landscape was harsh, jagged rock formations and sparse vegetation under a purple-tinged sky. The air was thin but breathable. In the distance, dark shapes rose against the horizon, possibly mountains or massive rock structures. "Your people are supposed to be here somewhere," Greg said to Hunter, who was scanning the terrain with its sensor pits fully extended. The Vorn turned to him and made a series of clicking sounds, then pointed with two limbs toward the distant formations. Greg nodded. "Okay, that way it is. But first, ... He removed the neural interface from his pack. "Let's try to communicate properly." Once the interface was activated, Greg immediately sensed Hunter's urgency. "Danger here. Others hunt. Here. Must move quickly. Other Vorn?" Greg asked aloud, concentrating on the concept. Hunter's response was clear. "Yes, many. Territory here. Will sense us soon." Greg felt a chill. "Will they attack me?" Hunter's answer wasn't reassuring. "Unknown. You different. But strange human in. Territory. May attack first." "Great," Greg muttered. "So I've escaped being a lab specimen only to become Vorm Cray." Hunter's next thought concept surprised him. "I protect. You saved." Bond formed. Greg stared at the alien predator. Through the neural link, he sensed something that, in a human, he would have called loyalty. But it was more complex, a mix of obligation, respect, and something else, something that had no human equivalent. "Thank you," Greg said simply. They began walking toward the distant formations, Greg limping slightly from injuries sustained in the crash. The moon's gravity was lighter than Earth's, which helped, but the terrain was treacherous. Sharp rocks cut through his boots, and the temperature dropped rapidly as the local sun began to set. After several hours, Greg was exhausted. His broken rib throbbed with each breath, and his water supply was running low. Hunter, however, seemed energized by the harsh environment. The Vorn moved with increasing speed and purpose. Suddenly, Hunter froze. Its sensor pits flared wide, and its body TENSED. Greg didn't need the neural interface to understand. "They're here, aren't they?" He barely finished speaking before dark shapes appeared on the ridge above them. 3 Vorn, larger than Hunter, their scales shifting colors to match the rocks around them. They moved with predatory grace, spreading out to surround Greg and Hunter. Hunter positioned itself between Greg and the others, its posture clearly protective. A series of clicks, hisses, and low vibrations passed between the Vorna language. Greg couldn't hope to understand without the interface. He fumbled to activate it again, desperate to know what was happening. As the device powered up, fragments of the communication reached him. Intruder, human, enemy, kill. Hunter's response: no, different human. Helped, healed. The largest Vorn, its scales a deep purple-black, advanced slowly. Greg sensed its dominance, even without the interface. This was clearly the leader of the hunting party. Through the neural link, Greg learned its name concept. Death dash from dash above dot death dash from dash above addressed Hunter directly. Weakness. Prey, not food. Disgrace. Hunter stood its ground, not weakness. New understanding. Human ally against greater threat. The leader seemed unimpressed. Its focus shifted to Greg, and through the neural link, Greg felt its predatory intent like a physical pressure. He was being sized up, assessed as prey. Hunter sensed it too. Without warning, the Vorn that had become Greg's ally launched itself at death from above. The two predators collided in a blur of limbs and flashing scales. Greg backed away, as the other Vorn watched the fight. The neural interface conveyed fragments of the violent exchange. This was no mere squabble, but a formal challenge for status and the right to decide Greg's fate. The battle was both beautiful and terrifying. Hunter moved with surprising speed for an injured creature, but death from above was larger and stronger. Their six-limbed combat resembled nothing Greg had ever seen, utilizing movements impossible for human anatomy. Blood dark and iridescent splattered the rocks. Hunter was thrown back, landing hard, but immediately sprang up to re-engage. Death from above pressed its advantage, two of its limbs pinning Hunter, while others struck repeatedly. Greg wanted to help, but knew intervention would only make things worse. This was Vorn culture in its purest form, hierarchy established through combat. Just when it seemed Hunter would lose, the smaller Vorn executed a maneuver that caught death from above off balance. Hunter slipped free and delivered a series of lightning-fast strikes to what Greg guessed were vulnerable points. Death from above stumbled, greenish blood flowing from multiple wounds. Hunter pressed forward, forcing the larger Vorn back until it fell. Hunter stood over the fallen leader, one sharp-clawed limb poised for a killing blow. The other Vorn watched, utterly still. Through the neural link, Greg understood this was the crucial moment by Vorn law. Hunter had earned the right to kill death from above and take its position. Greg held his breath, watching his alien friend make a choice that would determine both their fates. Hunter's limb remained raised for a long moment. Then, to the visible shock of the watching Vorn, it stepped back without delivering the death blow. No kill, no need. Understand new way. Death from above slowly rose, clearly confused by the mercy shown. The concept was foreign to Vorn culture, where dominance was absolute and weakness eliminated. Hunter turned to Greg, then back to the other Vorn. Through the neural link, Greg felt Hunter struggling to explain a concept the predators had never needed: compassion. The Vorn gathering place was unlike anything Greg had imagined. Deep within a massive cave system, the predators had created a society far more complex than humans had ever suspected. Hundreds of Vorn moved through chambers filled with strange, bioluminescent growths that provided light. The walls were marked with patterns Greg now recognized as territorial and family markings. Hunter walked beside Greg, their passage drawing stares and threatening postures from other Vorn. Death from above led them through the warren of tunnels. Though defeated, the large Vorn still commanded respect, and its acceptance of Hunter's mercy had confused and intrigued the others, enough to bring the human to their sacred meeting place. They entered a vast central chamber where the oldest and full, largest Vorn Greg had ever seen waited. Its scales had faded to a pale blue-gray, and 3 of its limbs showed signs of battle damage. Through the neural interface, Greg understood its name concept. First-Hunter-of-Stars. This was the elder of all Vorn, the keeper of their history and laws. Its sensor pits studied Greg with ancient wisdom. Human. Enemy. Why here? Hunter stepped forward, posture showing deference to the elder while still maintaining its protective stance near. Greg. Not enemy. Different. Has new way. Can help against the coming dark. Greg felt the ripple of reaction through the assembled Vorn. The coming dark was a concept he hadn't encountered before, but the fear it generated was unmistakable. First Hunter of Stars moved closer to Greg, its massive form towering over him. Show me this human's mind. Hunter looked at Greg, and through their neural link, conveyed what was being asked. The elder wanted direct connection through the interface. Greg swallowed hard. Connecting with Hunter had been intense, but this ancient predator's mind would be far more powerful. Still, it might be their only chance to establish true understanding. I'll do it, Greg said, adjusting the neural interface settings. The connection hit him like a physical blow. First Hunter of Stars' consciousness was vast, containing memories that stretched back centuries. The Vorn lived far longer than humans had guessed. Greg struggled to maintain his sense of self amid the flood of alien thoughts and memories. Gradually, the exchange stabilized. The elder probed Greg's mind with surprising gentleness, examining his memories of Earth, of the USS Horizon, of finding Hunter and their escape. In return, Greg received glimpses of Vorn history, their evolution as apex predators, their complex honor code, and finally, the terrible truth behind their recent aggression. The Vorn were being hunted themselves, a species from beyond there. Known space had begun systematically exterminating the Vorn, driving them from their traditional territories into human-settled areas. This species, which the Vorn knew only as the coming dark, used technology far beyond human or Vorn understanding. They left nothing alive in their wake. The elder withdrew from the connection, leaving Greg gasping. The information was overwhelming. But one thing was clear. Both humans and Vorn faced extinction. If this unknown enemy continued its advance, First Hunter of Stars addressed the gathered Vorn, then turned to Greg, its thoughts now clear through the interface. Human compassion. Strange concept. Weakness, we thought. But Hunter lives because of it. Shows different strength. Perhaps useful against coming dark. We don't have to be enemies, Greg said, speaking aloud while focusing his thoughts through the interface. Humans and Vorn can help each other against this threat. The elder considered this. Long ages, Vorn hunt alone. Pride in strength. But coming dark too strong, even for us. Together we might stand a chance, Greg said. Human technology with Vorn hunting skills. Hunter moved to Greg's side, their thoughts aligned through months of connection. Through the interface, they jointly proposed an alliance, a concept foreign to the solitary Vorn. The elder was silent for a long time. Then, a new thought concept emerged. One Greg sensed had never existed in Vorn language before. Cooperation. A commotion at the cave entrance interrupted. The historic moment. Vorn scouts rushed in, their thoughts broadcasting alarm. Hunter immediately tensed, sensing what was happening before Greg could process it. Ships landing. Human ships. Weapons ready. Greg didn't need the interface to guess who had found them. Harris, he said grimly. He must have tracked our shuttle. First Hunter of Stars looked to Greg. What will these humans do? They don't understand, Greg explained. They see you only as dangerous predators. They'll try to capture or kill you for study or to protect themselves. The elder's thought was simple, and we kill them first. No, Greg stood up straight despite his injuries. That will only prove they're right about you. Let me talk to them. I can explain. Hunter backed Greg's request, adding, Human Greg different. Other humans can learn. The elder considered, then agreed. You speak to humans. But if they attack, we defend. Greg removed the neural interface and handed it to Hunter, their eyes human. An alien meeting in perfect understanding. Then he walked alone toward the cave entrance. hands raised to show he was unarmed. Outside, the harsh landscape was lit by spotlights from 3 military shuttles. Armed figures moved into position, and at their center stood Dr. Frank Harris alongside Captain Banks. "Lieutenant Mason," Harris called through an amplifier. "Step away from the cave. You're in danger." "The only danger here is misunderstanding," Greg replied, continuing to walk forward slowly. "The Vorn aren't our enemies," Harris sneered. "They've killed hundreds of colonists. They're predators, nothing more." "You're wrong," Greg said firmly. "They're intelligent beings with a culture as complex as our own, and they're running from something that threatens us all." Captain Banks stepped forward. "What are you talking about, Mason?" Before Greg could answer, movement behind him made. Everyone tense. Hunter had emerged from the cave, followed by Death from above and several other Vorn. Instead of attacking, they arranged themselves behind Greg in a clear display of deference. Harris stared in disbelief. "What have you done to them?" "I showed them compassion," Greg said simply, "something they'd never experienced before. And in return, they showed me truth." The Vorn moved forward until they stood beside Greg, not behind him. Hunter extended the neural interface, which Greg took and offered to Captain Banks. "See for yourself," Greg urged. "They're fighting for survival, just like us, and their real enemy is still coming." Harris shook his head. "This is absurd. They're animals." "No," Banks said slowly, studying the scene before him. "Look at them. They're organized, deliberate." He turned to Harris. "Your orders were to study them. Lieutenant Mason has done just that more successfully than anyone could have imagined." As if to emphasize the point, First Hunter of Stars emerged from the cave, its ancient form commanding attention. The elder Vorn moved with dignified steps until it stood directly before the humans. Then, in a gesture that left Greg speechless, it lowered its massive form in what could only be described as a bow, not submission, not weakness, but acknowledgement of equals. Harris spluttered in protest, but Banks silenced him with a raised hand. The captain stepped forward and, after a moment's hesitation, returned the bow. Greg felt hope rise within him. "Captain, the Vorn have information about a threat moving toward both our territories. Something they call the Coming Dark. We need to form an alliance." Banks looked from Greg to the assembled Vorn, and back to the human ships. "It seems we have much to discuss, Lieutenant." He turned to Harris. "And it seems your research will take a different direction than planned." As night fell on the alien moon, humans and Vorn sat together in the great chamber, communicating through the neural interface that Greg had brought. The beginning of understanding was forming between species that had once seen each other only. As threats, Hunter remained by Greg's side, a living bridge between two worlds. What the Vorn had mistaken for weakness in humans' compassion had become the foundation for their shared future. And the predator that now answered to the human did so not from subjugation, but from the most powerful force in any universe, mutual respect.